So last year, I went through a very difficult time. One of my sons was in the hospital, and I was freaked out. I didn't know what to do. As a psychologist, I needed help because I was getting conflicting diagnoses and prognoses, and frankly, I didn't know how to help him. So I went to a doctor who came highly recommended. I'd never met this man before. And I went into his office and I told him what was going on for me. And he looked at me and he sighed, and with incredible compassion for me and for the doctors, he said something that I'll never forget. He said, "Oh boy, I supervised that unit for over 10 years. And medical students and residents and even attending physicians, they often make a very common mistake. They try and be smart and not helpful. And I'm really sorry that happened to you. Let me tell you, this is not my first rodeo. Your son will be fine." And he went on to tell me a whole bunch of other stuff. And he said, "Look, it'll take longer than you think, but truly, your son will be fine." And we chatted for about, 40 minutes or so. I can't tell you how fabulous I felt after what he said. I mean, it was like the weight of the world lifted from my shoulders, not in a superficial way like, "Oh good, he'll be fine," but I just felt like he knew what he was talking about. How is it that somebody super smart and competent can make me feel so great? And I mean great, I wanted to kiss him. And these other doctors, super smart and competent, made me feel so crappy. And smart but not helpful. I've done that. It's 30 years as an executive coach, talking to people and being smart but not necessarily helpful. I saw exactly what he was talking about. And I experienced this amazing feeling of, oh my God, this is what I want to do. What's that about? That is the heliotropic effect. The heliotropic effect is the tendency for all living systems to move towards energy, which is life-sustaining, and away from energy, which is depleting. From single-cell organisms to complex systems like us. If you put a plant in the windowsill, it tilts towards the sun. That's an example of the heliotropic effect. If you pour salt water on its roots, you can imagine the roots sort of pulling away, right? That's the heliotropic effect. Well, it's true in botany and in the natural sciences, and we know this. It's a natural law. They've known this for many, many years. But just recently, it's been understood and studied in organizations and with people. And so, I've been really interested in understanding this and using this in my executive coaching and my work with people. And so I got to know this fellow, Dr. Kim Cameron. He teaches at the University of Michigan Business School, Ross Business School. He and his colleagues have studied this phenomenon. And lo and behold, it is true in organizations just the same. What they've found, and these guys, they study positive deviance, what goes right in organizations so that we can learn about what goes right with leaders and people so that we can do more of that. Here's what they found. Positive energizers, what he calls heliotropic leaders, make people feel great, right? And negative energizers make people feel crappy. And the results are quite dramatic. What does it mean to feel great? When you're around a positive energizer, you feel uplifted. You feel like sun on your leaves. You just feel good in their presence. Why? You can't quite put your finger on it, but you feel good in their presence. What's with the negative energizers? What do? Well, you feel crappy in their presence, but here's what they do. The positive energizers, they listen. They're compassionate. They're forgiving. They're vulnerable. They're real. They smile. That's kind of obvious. It's us at our best. What do the negative energizers do? Well, they're crappy listeners. They're cynical, pessimistic, negative, critical. I mean, when you're around these people, you just can't wait to get away from them. You're in a meeting and your energy's being sucked right out of you. Negative energizer, positive energizer. How they actually study this is they ask people, what's it like to be around them on like a +10 to -10 scale. +10, I feel great. -10, I want to kill myself. So we all know what it's like to be around them. And in fact, the research, these guys have researched people in companies, and the effect on companies is quite dramatic. They had all kinds of leaders practice the behaviors of the heliotropic leaders, and they watched the results. What did they have them do? They practiced gratitude, compassion, forgiveness, kindness, follow through on commitments, smiling in their own authentic, real way, and they watched the results. And of course, the results were dramatic. Higher profitability, higher productivity, higher employee retention, employee loyalty, customer retention, all kinds of great stuff. And of course, people themselves in the organizations, fantastic. Everybody knows this. In fact, compared with two people of equal competence, the heliotropic person, the positive energizer, is going to get promoted and or hired more than the negative heliotropic person. I was at Google recently. I was talking to this fellow, Jonathan Rosenberg, who wrote the book with Eric Schmidt, How Google Works. He was giving a lecture on this stuff, and I walked up to him afterwards and I said, how does this work at Google? And he said, let me tell you a story. And I said, you're welcome to use it in your TED Talk. It's in the book. He said when he was interviewed after business school, he was interviewing with McKinsey Consulting, and he was up against a guy which he calls Hodsworth Bodsworth III. He was a guy from Harvard Business School, and he was clearly more qualified, highly pedigreed, and better looking too. And he was in the interview waiting to go in, and Hodsworth was in there being interviewed, and he had 60 minutes for the interview, and Hodsworth was in there for 90 minutes, so he's chatting with the receptionist waiting for his time to go in. And the receptionist is going to visit California, which is where Jonathan is from, and so Jonathan is writing a little map of where she should go and what she should do and where she should visit and stuff like that. And it's his time to go in for the interview, and the interview goes well. And he gets a call the next day, and he doesn't know what's going to happen. He goes in and he meets with the interviewer, and the interviewer says, your handwriting sucks. And it was the note that he had written for the receptionist. And then he went on to say, the interviewer said, look, the other guy was clearly qualified, but he wasn't as heliotropic as you. He didn't use the term heliotropic. And they use this at Google now. They call it the Hodsworth-Bodsworth rule for hiring. When Jonathan was explaining this to me, he was incredibly heliotropic with me. He made me feel great. He was generous and forthcoming and vulnerable and real, and then he apologized for having to run to another meeting when he was just offering of himself to me. That's the essence of this heliotropic effect. Heliotropic leaders make people feel great by being authentic and real and vulnerable and kind. It's that simple. We all know how good it is. Everyone knows what it's like to be around people who make us feel great, and we know what it's like to be around people who don't. So the question is, well, if it's so great, and it's so great for companies, and it's so great for leaders to practice heliotropic behaviors, why don't people just do it? Well, there's some science behind that. And the science behind that is the negative is stronger than the positive. What do I mean by that? If you walk in the woods and you hear a branch snap, you immediately go into fight or flight mode because you think it's bad. When somebody says, I'd like to give you some feedback, you're not thinking it's anything good. When you see up in the road ahead and you see a coiled something or other and it looks like a snake and you're a little tense and you go up there and you see that it's just a rope, you've imagined a snake and a rope, your body doesn't just relax. You're still staying tense. The negative is way more stronger than the positive. That's how our brains are wired. We're geared to see the glass half full. We're geared to look for faults. We're unbelievably critical. When your kid brings home 5 A's and a D, you don't say, great report card. You say, what's the matter with the D? When in fact, it's a great report card. We tend to look for the deficits. We see problems, we see difficulties, we're fault finding. It's our default position. We do that because our brains are wired to look for problems and difficulties. When somebody gives you a positive praise and negative critical feedback, the negative critical stings and lasts longer than the positive, which is why all the research on organizational behavior and leaders tells us they know this is science, you got to give 5 attaboys to 1 what were you thinking. Not 5 to 0, by the way, 5 to 1. But that's because 1-to-1 doesn't work. They know this. This is researched. It's also true in marriages. Very famous researcher, Irving Gottman, it's a long time ago, about 20 years ago, videotaped couples in marital therapy for 15 minutes, just talking about a controversial topic, and he could predict who would get divorced based on the ratio of positive to negative comments. And if they weren't 5 to 1, they call it the Losada ratio. If it wasn't 5 to 1, he could predict their divorce. This notion of the negative being stronger than the positive has been researched in organizations and in families. We know this stuff. We know how true it is. So that's our challenge. Knowing isn't doing. Knowing this stuff, all you got to do, all leaders have to do, is intentionally, deliberately, consciously practice giving positive praise and genuinely, authentically, in a real way, being their best self. That means being compassionate, being forgiving, being vulnerable, being real, being kind. It just takes a little bit of effort. And by the way, people can feel our intentions. You know when somebody says, "Can I help you?" They don't mean it. And you know when someone says, "Can I help you?" You can feel it. Again, this is the whole kit and caboodle. How do you make people feel? That one doctor made me feel so great, super competent, but what he did is made me feel great. And we do the same to others. Our intentions are contagious. Somebody can smile at you. I was talking to a CEO once and just recently, and she said, "You told me this a long time ago, Harry. I never forgot this." I forgot. You said when you pass somebody in the hall, say hello. It's that simple, because we were talking about another executive who didn't. She said, "I've always remembered that." People love her, by the way. Another CEO said to me, "The best thing you ever told me, Harry, was before someone leaves my office, make sure I remember how I've made them feel." Really, really simple. How do we make people feel? Intend to be more heliotropic, forgiving, compassionate, grateful, appreciative, and real, yes, and vulnerable. We know this stuff, and we will still screw it up. And when we screw it up, what you do is you quickly forgive yourself, and you move on. You do the next right thing. I also own a restaurant in Ann Arbor, Michigan, called the Black Pearl. The other day, I went into the restaurant, and I said, "Hey, Matt, can you give me a bottle of Fiji water?" And he said, "A hello would be nice." I love Matt. And he was right. He was absolutely right. In that moment, I just forgot. I didn't say, "Hey, hi, Matt, how you doing? Can you give me a..." I mean, simple as that. And he was playful, but he was really meaning it. And he also, this is a guy, big burly dude, he wrote on the chalkboard where we put our oyster specials and beer specials, "Harry, I thought you'd like this." It was a Mark Twain quote. "Kindness is the language the blind can see and the deaf can hear." Isn't that beautiful? But it's not about the quote, it's about being kind. And does somebody else feel that? Just walk past somebody and smile. That simple. And that hard. The more you do it, the easier it gets. You know when someone sneezes, you say, "God bless you"? You do that because of habit. The idea is the more you practice and intend consciously to be more compassionate, grateful, and forgiving, the more it's more natural for you to do that. So, 6 years ago, we hired a woman at our restaurant who was incredible with customers. I mean, she was really heliotropic with customers. But with coworkers, not so much. She was more salt than sun. And over many, many years, 6 years to be exact, she's really transformed. And now she graduated from the Black Pearl, and she's working at an ad agency and doing great. And she sent me a text, which I said, could I read the text at this TED Talk? And she said, sure. She's leading up the effort to visit a young man who got in trouble. He's in jail. He used to work at the Black Pearl, and she's coordinating the efforts of visiting and sending letters and stuff. And this is the text that she sent recently. "I just spent 30 minutes on the phone with B's girlfriend. As we were hanging up, she said, 'I feel so much better after talking to you. Thank you so much for being there for us as we go through this.' Then Jackie wrote, 'I got this weird feeling, like I wanted to smile and cry all at the same time. This helping other people thing, you're right, it's what life's all about.'" Now I asked Jackie, I said, "What do you think is the transformation?" She said, "I don't know, I think you guys never gave up on me." I think that's true. And I think what's also true is that, and this is what the science shows, being around heliotropic people is contagious. It uplifts others. Yeah, we didn't give up on her, but we've created a culture, or at least we attempt to to practice all this stuff that we preach, all this stuff that we know, because knowing isn't doing. 15 years ago, I was giving a talk in Australia, and I said at the end of the talk, you can come upstairs. I wrote a book called Secrets of the Obvious. I'll give you a signed copy. It's free. Woman in the front row, I remember it vividly, she goes, "What's the catch?" There's no catch. You just got to walk upstairs for the free book. There's no catch to this. There's no catch to being heliotropic. There's no catch to being more kind, to being more grateful, to being more forgiving. None. All we have to do is that. And again, talking about this isn't doing it. It's the doing that matters. And it starts today, now. You know, TED is about ideas worth spreading. This isn't about ideas worth spreading. This is already known. Just do it. Just be more kind to the person in front of you. Smile. Offer them a hand. Be the sun, not the salt. Leave them with an afterglow, not an aftertaste. Thank you, guys.